Hello, beautiful people, and today, with the help of not my school laptop, yes, I am, because I have to continue this election series that's been going on since October, and I'm only at the 1952 elections, so. Yes.
Give up. I love
Not yet. I love
like,
this stuff.
That is like expecting to win free shit off a team.
What, expecting to get through the series?
Yeah, in any timely manner.
I don't expect it in a timely manner. I just make about 3-4 elections at a time, and then.
Yeah, and it's still gonna take you like a year to do them all.
That's fine.
No.
With me. Alright. Well, after that conversation with my mother, today we are going to be with the election series again. If you are new here, go back to part 1. This has been a long time running, but that's okay. Let's get started with part 8. Presidential elections in American history. With the 1952 election. Here we go.
Mr. Beat presents Presidential Elections in American History. The 42nd presidential election in American history took place on November 4th, 1952. Oh, Harry. He had managed to get the country into another war. But now the United States military was acting as the leading force for an organization Truman had helped start, called the United Nations. UN forces arrived to help defend South Korea after communist North Korea invaded them. This was back in 1950. 2 years later, the conflict dragged on as a stalemate. Truman called it just a police action, but today we know it as the Korean War. Even though the war still gets glossed over, tens of thousands of Americans died in it, and Truman's popularity declined the longer it continued. Senator Joseph McCarthy's anti-communist attacks and the revelation of widespread corruption of federal employees also hurt Truman's approval rating so much that he hesitated to run for re-election. He cautiously proceeded, though, trying to talk Adlai Stevenson II to run. Stevenson was the governor of Illinois and the grandson of former Vice President Adlai Stevenson I. But Stevenson was like, meh, I really don't want to be president that much. And the populist Estes Kefauver, a senator from Tennessee, became a leading candidate. After Kefauver upset Truman in the New Hampshire primary, Truman dropped out. Kefauver continued to win many primaries, but powerful people within the Democratic Party establishment simply thought he was too much of an outsider, and therefore could not be trusted. At the Democratic convention, Kefauver was the early favorite, but eventually the party's bosses were able to convert enough people to support Adlai Stevenson, who finally was like, alright, fine, I'll run, sure. They nominated John Sparkman, a senator from Alabama, as his running mate. This was mostly because they wanted the former Dixiecrats.
Sorry about the little bit of interruption here.
As Sparkman was alright with racial segregation. The Republican Party had a 4-way race for the nomination. Dwight Eisenhower, the World War II hero, had finally been persuaded to run for president, and he had 3 familiar opponents: Robert Taft, Earl Warren, and Harold Stassen. Because Warren and Stassen only won the primaries in their home states, really this was more of a 2-way race between Eisenhower and Taft. The two had quite different foreign policies. Taft was a non-interventionist, criticizing the Korean War and calling for less involvement in foreign conflicts. Eisenhower was cool with the Truman Doctrine, seeing the spread of communism as a big threat that needed to be stopped whenever possible. Taft also criticized Truman for the welfare state that had ballooned since the New Deal, while Eisenhower was cool with keeping the welfare state. Eisenhower and Taft were neck and neck in the primary race. Going into the Republican convention, everyone knew it would be one of those two, but Taft's campaign got accused of silencing Eisenhower delegates from southern states. Whether true or not, this ended up hurting Taft. After a bitter and divided convention, Eisenhower barely came out as the winner, with Richard Nixon, a senator from California, as his running mate, who accused...
Mind you, when I vote, I don't know about what goes on in the 1972 election. I'm just the average citizen living in 1952. Truman is running the country. And everything's going like right now. And so, actually, knowing the information I know, I'm going to go ahead, but anyway, I'm going to let Mr. B go on after I do that. I'm going to vote for Dwight Eisenhower because Stevenson's kind of boring, kind of an egghead. Well, Eisenhower is more charismatic, more exciting, and it wouldn't be sensible to elect the same party, the incumbent party, again if things aren't going so well for the country. You see what I'm saying? And Nixon is fairly unharmful at this point.
Others of being crooks, and some accused him of being a crook, but he cleared everything up with a dramatic speech where he mentioned his dog Checkers. Eisenhower was an incredibly popular candidate thanks to being a war hero, and he drew huge crowds. He was way ahead in the polls throughout his campaign, and even had a catchy slogan, "I like Ike." Adlai Stevenson drew big crowds too, but he became famously known as an egghead, not only because of his baldness, but because of his tendency of being too intellectual and out of touch with ordinary people. Both campaigns used television ads quite a bit, marking a shift that many people actually had televisions now. Toward the end of his campaign, Eisenhower announced he would look at ending the Korean War and bringing the troops home. And here are the results. Dwight Eisenhower easily won, becoming the 34th president in American history. Promising to bring the troops home from Korea provided the final boost he needed to kick butt. He received 442 electoral votes and 55.2% of the popular vote. Adlai Stevenson finished with just 89 electoral votes and 44.3% of the popular vote. The Democrats had lost control of the executive branch for the first time in 20 years. Ike did well everywhere except the Deep South. Richard Nixon became the 36th vice president in American history. This was the first election in which a computer predicted the results. And for some reason, turnout soared compared to the last election. I'll see you for the next presidential election, buddy.
Go to 1956. I mean, do I even have to play the election of 1956? I mean, I'll tell you this. It's just a rematch between Eisenhower and Taft. Things are going well for the country. The Korean War has ended. Everything that Eisenhower told us he would do, he did. And Stevenson's still the boring old egghead. So I'm voting for Ike again. I'm moving on. No way am I playing basically the same video again.
Mr. Beat presents
basically the same video again.
Presidential.
And you can tell that because it was... And yes, before you ask me, I am using
Mr. Beat presents
Microsoft Edge. Flame me on the internet. I know. I quite like the browser. It's underrated.
Presidential elections in American history. The 44th presidential election in American history took place on November 8th, 1960. It was the first election in which Alaska and Hawaii could both participate. Dwight Eisenhower had a pretty good run, but he was the first president officially not allowed to seek a third term. His vice president for 8 years, Richard Nixon, now enthusiastically sought the presidency. Several Republicans, however, supported Nelson Rockefeller, the governor of New York and the member of the wealthy Rockefeller family. Rockefeller was the leader of the liberal/moderate wing of the Republican Party. After Rockefeller decided to drop out of the race, Nixon easily won the Republican nomination. But he was a little worried he didn't have the Rockefeller Republicans on his side, so he met with Rockefeller to make sure that they were on the same page on many issues. By doing this, Nixon sort of officially became a big government Republican, you could say. Henry Cabot Lodge Jr., the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, was Nixon's running mate. night. Lodge was a familiar name, as he was the grandson of Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, and also had a bunch of other ancestors who were involved with national politics. The Democrats knew they had to nominate someone exciting to get back to the White House. Many Democrats were interested. Most of them were new to the national scene, but most were just not that exciting. Pat Brown, the governor of California, wanted the nomination, but wasn't that exciting. Stuart Symington, a senator from Missouri, wanted it and was a bit more exciting. Then there was Adlai Stevenson, who had lost the last two presidential elections. Meh, not exciting. Wayne Morse, a senator from Oregon, better. Lyndon Johnson, the Senate Majority Leader, even better. Hubert Humphrey, a senator from Minnesota, yeah, kinda got people fired up, but really, there was just one man that energized the Democratic Party far more than any other: John Kennedy. And despite some harsh criticism that he was too young to be president, he was just 43 after all, the Democratic Party went with him anyway. Even though Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson had their disagreements, Kennedy helped unite the party behind him by asking Johnson to be his running mate, and Johnson accepted. So it was Nixon versus Kennedy. Both of them drew huge, enthusiastic crowds.
I'm gonna vote now, even though Mr. B has some more things to say. 1960 election. Everything was going well for the country. We have an outsider who